Hello and welcome to the Teacher's Corner podcast. My name is Miss Mems and I have got a guest with me today. My guest is Krista Thompson. Krista and I worked together in nursery. The first time we met each other, we just gravitated towards each other. We're very, very similar in personality, and also we had very similar ideas on what we wish the early years looked like, what we wish that it looked like for the staff, what we wished would improve for the children. We had very similar ideas on different things about early years education. And so when the idea for a podcast came, I knew that she was going to be one of my guests. So today, Krista is my first guest in episode 2 of the Teacher's Corner podcast. FYI, if you hear a baby in the background, it's just Krista's son. He probably just wants to say hello and make an appearance. Miss Krista, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, so I'm Miss Krista. I am in my early 30s for a few more months. And I'm an early years teacher. So I graduated from my early childhood education program in Canada in 2013. And I've pretty much worked in early years since. And now I'm currently teaching at a college. I'm a lecturer for health and social care and early years.
Amazing, thank you. So the main reason I've got Krista here is because we used to work together, and there were some things about the early, we absolutely love the early years. We are aligned on a lot of things, about different methods and just the way we respond to the children. Can I just tell you something about Krista's house? Like, her setup for her son is amazing. Like, she's my soul sister, because when I saw this setup, I was like, yeah, this is it. This is life. When you have a school in your house. So anyway, there's so many things we used to talk about the early years and things we felt would make it a lot better. And I shared last week my 3 challenges I have with the early years, just the way it's set up. I talked about the mental and emotional support for teachers, because the early years, people don't realize how stressful it is and how draining and how it takes so much out of you. And you literally have to just leave your troubles at the door, go in and be there for the children, and that's really, really hard. And I feel like there's not enough mental and emotional support for early years teachers. I also talked about the pay and how poor it is. And, I feel like we've had conversations about this as well. And it's like, there isn't one solution per se, but we do have some ideas of things that could help improve. And then the third thing I talked about was just career progression. Like, what do we do once you get to nursery manager? It seems like there's nothing else for you to do. And also access to funding for courses and stuff, just to keep our minds sharp and keep us informed on all the new research and everything that's out there for early years teachers. So these are my 3 challenges. What are yours? And just share your thoughts.
So we have very similar challenges. As you said, we used to complain about them together all the time. I definitely think that the way that the industry is structured, the hours are too long, the pay is too little, and oftentimes in the early years, we're not appreciated by parents. It's sort of one or the other. They either really appreciate you, or they think that you just sit down and play with the kids all day. And depending on the setting you're in, that could be true, but certainly was not true for us. So that's definitely one of the challenges. And then progression wasn't necessarily a challenge for me, but I would be frustrated when I would be speaking to people in the field who didn't know about possible progression that they could have. And part of that is because there isn't promotion for it. And a lot of early year settings are underfunded because it is a very expensive business to run. And if you're not getting subsidized enough from the government, then it makes it a very expensive business model. And obviously you don't want to be charging the parents to the point where they can't afford it. But then equally, it makes it difficult to have different after school programs, to have other staff come in. So then you make your staff, you have to make your staff work all day kind of thing instead of them working shorter hours. You're not promoting conferences that they can go to because you can't necessarily afford to send them, and problems like that. So I think those are pretty standard across the board issues in the industry. There's something called, I want to say it's the Early Years Alliance or something. I can't remember what they're called, but they're basically a lobby group, and they do lots of reports on the early years industry. And they just recently came out with one, and that was basically the findings was that people don't want to be early years teachers anymore because the pay, you can get better pay elsewhere, less hours, and less stress. I mean, I kind of knew coming back from maternity leave. My son is the only child I have, and he's one. And I went back to work this year, and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to go back to working Monday to Friday, the hours I was working before I had him, and then coming home to then have to parent him. And yet, most of the women that we worked with together are moms, and they have young children as well. So, that's the expectation that we're putting on these workers, and they don't want to do it. People don't want to do that anymore. So I think something has to change in the industry for sure. I don't have the answer as to how. I think I have, some ideas, but I think the government needs to listen to professionals who are studying these things or studying the trends. And if they do that, then they could possibly make some real change. Also, with the progression as well, I think a lot of people think that the progression within a nursery would be, a key worker to a room leader to possibly an assistant manager if that's a position that's available at the nursery you're working at, and then nursery manager. But there is more out there. So if you are more like academically minded, then you could move into post-secondary education. So working at a college or university and teaching early years, which is what I do. And that's been really exciting because I just started it. So I shouldn't, I'm not coming into this interview with loads of experience yet, but I do think that it's exciting because I worked in early years for 10 years, and now I have that experience to come to with young people to say, this is what I'm teaching you, this is the curriculum, and these are the 10 years, these are what happened in the 10 years in the different settings that I worked in. I think that's really important, and I found that super interesting when I was in the program with my own teachers. So I think that's important. I think people kind of need to get a little bit creative when they think about progression. You can always, seek advice from counselors, job counselors and stuff. But there's also, the the lobbyist group that I told you about before, that's also something that we could do. So if you are good at sort of like reading policy and being able to take data out of reports and sort of make them into things that lay people can understand, then you can work for those organizations as well, because your experience is obviously quite helpful in that area as well.
I feel like a lot of people don't even know that this is out there. Like a lot of people don't realize that there are these options. They feel stuck. So that's one thing I wanted to ask you about. And the second thing is, so these teachers, these young early years teachers who want to go into the system, knowing all these challenges and these hours that they're going to be working, what advice would you give to them?
I think young people or, new people going into this field who have just trained, I think it's a really great place for them to be because they're young, they're energized, they're inspired, they're just coming out of school, so they have a lot of really good ideas. They still have that bank of creativity that hasn't been completely drained from them yet. And so my advice to them would be, get involved, have fun, do your thing. If you know that it's not a place you're going to be long term, then that's absolutely fine. You know, you haven't failed, you haven't picked the wrong career path. If you enjoy working with children, focus on that. Do it for the amount of time that it feels right to you. But just remember that you can move on from that. And do your research as well. You can just Google things, depending on what country you live in as well, because the qualifications you need to do different things in different countries are not the same. But you can always study as well afterwards. You can get your master's, you can do different awards, you can do different certificates. Don't be afraid of further education. A lot of the times you'll find that, if you do it with someone like the Open University or, a different institution that's similar, you'll find that you're doing it alongside people who are in a very similar situation as you. So you might think to yourself, oh, I'm in my 40s. It's so embarrassing that I'm going back to university. But then you end up in a tutorial group and you're the youngest person there. So, I think that's important to remember. And learning, I respect anyone who wants to learn. Learning is a lifelong skill. It's a lifelong hobby. We should all strive to be learning all the time. So, don't be ashamed of that and just don't talk yourself out of it. It is scary, but once you're in it, it's super interesting. And, yeah, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. It's really cheesy, but it's true. So you just have to try. And like I said, if you do enough research, you might find that something that you're interested in doing, you don't even need a qualification for as well. So, you might not have to go back to school, but it's just something to think about.
Good teachers who are leaving, you've left, who are leaving early years, and there's still so many good teachers out there, but a lot of them just feel stuck. Like, I feel like they've lost the joy for it.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, why do you think they've lost the joy for it? And then what can they do to A, get it back, or B, move on to something else?
Yeah.
Because I feel like when you've lost the joy for it, it's time to start to rethink, what you're doing.
Yeah, I think working with children is exhausting. I think, in every setting I've worked in, there's been one person that I can name who has been working with children for too long and needs to retire. Like, literally in all of my placements and in every nursery that I've ever worked in, except for one school, but pretty much in all of my placements, there's been one person who is rude to the children, is unprofessional, very clearly doesn't want to be there. And I think that's because we don't get paid enough. We work too long, and the job itself is quite hard, physically, emotionally, mentally. I think if you turned up at work at 9 and, you left at 2 or 3 and you had sort of maybe 5 or 6 kids that day, you could probably do it for a lot longer than, having sort of 23 kids in a class and having lots of other adults there, and it just kind of being like some sort of organized chaos. The volume level is exhausting. The parents can be challenging at times, which is demoralizing. And you kind of think, what's the point? Why am I putting all this effort in when, that they don't appreciate it? The kids won't remember it. There's a lot of different factors that go into that. I think if people feel valued, people feel appreciated, people feel rested, people feel respected, then they can do what they're doing a lot longer. And it's just, again, a problem within the industry everywhere, that really needs to be addressed.
I agree. I think that people should not be afraid they shouldn't feel like, oh, I've done this for so long, this is all I know to do. They should know that there's other things out there. With your earliest qualification, there's still more that you can do. And I know how, first off, did you discover all the options, like all the different options for teachers? Where did this discovery come from? How did you make this discovery?
So I actually spoke to my manager at work, and she had sort of mentioned a few different things, and I thought that was interesting. So I thought I would do a little bit of research. LinkedIn was actually a really good resource for me. So you can plug in your qualifications in LinkedIn and say that you're looking for a job, and they will recommend things that you are qualified for. Which is super helpful. I also did my bachelor's degree with the Open University while I was working in the nursery, and looking at their page as well. And sort of when you look at different companies and things, I would see, 8 of your alumni work at this place. So that's also quite insightful because you see, oh, okay, well, this is an employer who's interested in people who have maybe gone back to school or whatever. So I think that's where social media can come in really handy. I also just tried to think creatively, like what our industry is that could use somebody who's worked in early years. That was how I found that alliance. Was I thought, oh well, maybe there are lobbyist groups who are looking for writers because I enjoy writing, and maybe I could be a writer for them. So I think just like playing on your skills and your background, putting them together, and just thinking, where could I be of use? But you do have to get creative because it isn't an obvious sort of trajectory. Like it might be if you work in corporate, for example, and you sort of want to work your way up the corporate ladder, that path is sort of illuminated for those people. And again, it is kind of the same in nurseries because if you go in as a key worker, you could aspire to be the manager one day, but it is a much shorter trajectory than some other fields.
Okay, so my last question for you: what do you do for your mental and emotional health? What did you used to do when you're working in nursery? First off, actually, is it better now? Like, how do you feel mentally and emotionally now at work compared to when you were working in?
Yeah, so it's hard to compare because obviously I just came off of maternity leave with my son and I wasn't working in the nursery after I had him. I think when I was in the nursery before I had my son, who's now trying to be a part of this podcast. Good boy. I worked out a lot. It's quite a physical job working with children, so I would go to the gym sort of 3 or 4 times a week, go on runs and stuff, just move my body, and it felt good at the time. I felt quite tired. I still felt quite tired at work because it's so full on. We work long days at the nursery that we worked at, starting before 8 and some days finishing after 5:30. So that was tough, but everything's so much easier when you don't have a kid. Now I find it more challenging, so I've actually just I'm trying to hire someone to come and help clean the house while I'm at work because I'm finding it challenging to stay on top of everything. But I think self-care is super important. So one of the ways that I do that now, and it's super easy for me, is I just throw a podcast on and make dinner. I find that really grounds me at the end of the day. I go to bed early. I read before bed. And I'm always very aware of how I'm feeling. And if I'm feeling too overwhelmed, then I try to plan something with my friends. And I get someone to come and babysit my son. My husband has a business, so he is just always MIA. So unfortunately, I can't really count on him too much. But yeah, I do think it is super important to be aware of how you're feeling.
So, Krista, thank you so much. This has been fun. What are your final words to our listeners?
I just think, if you're working with children, first of all, thank you so much for everything that you do. It is, I don't think you're told that enough. And what you're doing is so important. Follow your heart, follow your dreams, and don't give up. If you think that you're destined for something else, go for it. Your perspective on life, your perspective on your work is important and it's valuable, and people need to hear that as well. So just, keep doing you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Krista. Thank you. This has been lovely. And guys, please just in the comment section, send some love to Krista. And yeah, thank you. If you got to this point, thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more episodes. Until next time, spread love, spread positivity, and be inspired.